Holy crap, Lois. They killed off Blue Sky?
Yeah, they just wanted the Ice Age IP.
Welcome to Spoiler Alerts. I know it's been a while, but we are back, and I am joined once again, as ever, by my co-host Kyle.
Hi guys. We're back and we're here in full swing once again, and I don't think I need to be the first to tell everybody that the world's kind of went to shit since the last time that we did this.
Yeah, and hi to all our audio listeners, because we're not going to be putting this just on YouTube anymore. So yeah, hi to the people listening on Spotify or just podcast players or whatever.
We hope everybody's doing good, hope everybody's staying safe, but now that we're back in full swing, we have quite a few things to discuss because obviously, as most people know, cinemas are closed right now. There isn't actually a lot going on within like the general film world at the moment, but in turn that kind of means that in more recent events, I think it's fair to say that at least everybody is paid for at least one subscription service within like the last year.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is probably the best way to go about it, because YouTube keeps taking down our videos for copyrights, so...
Even now, as you're watching it on YouTube, we're not going to be doing anything extravagant with the footage. We're keeping it as minimalistic as possible, so none of the YouTube copyright bots decide to take us down. Come on, guys! What were you wanting to do with us before? We just wanted to talk about Spider-Man movies for a bit. Why are you taking it down?
Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is, and if YouTube doesn't want that, then fine, we'll comply and we'll just put it on other things, because YouTube is not the best option for podcasts anyway. It's honestly low-key kind of bad, but I won't get into that because that's not a topic for today.
Yeah.
Right, so streaming services.
There's actually been quite a long road getting from where streaming services are starting, where we've come since then.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the main start of it kind of started with Netflix specifically, because before they became the big streaming giants that we know them now as today, they were once like a DVD rental service for the longest time. And I believe it was starting with House of Cards in 2013, 2014, when they started making original series. And
that was their first one, yeah.
And around the same time, that also led to the creation of stuff like Orange is the New Black and BoJack Horseman. Jumped to 6 years later, and they are damn well probably the biggest provider of movies we have right now, as far as we're concerned, because theatres are closed. Most people aren't willing to pay really expensive prices for PVOD because nobody wants to pay, 20 quid for Trolls World Tour access for 2 days, do they? So ever since then, we've seen such a massive rise within like the world of streaming services, and it's providing, to put it bluntly, a few good and bad sort of scary changes within the industry. I'm not going to be one of those artsy Cannes Film Festival snobs out there that's going to say, oh, streaming bad, streaming the death of cinema, because if you are going by that logic with barely any evidence or things to back up your points, get out. But things are changing and things are getting a bit scary, and even since Netflix became the big top streaming kings, so many streaming services within the past few years have started to come out ever since then. And today we're going to start looking at all of these streaming services individually and just saying what our thoughts on them are, because right now people are at home, people have nothing to do, people want to watch stuff. We might as well provide our opinions and provide it to you and just see where things stick for us.
Yeah, I mean, you can also see this as a buying guide. We've personally tried out most of these services, so we can sort of give you our sort of feedback and our experiences with them all.
And I have paid for most of them already, and I will be the first one to admit I'm kind of a sad sucker for them, because when most of the new movies nowadays are coming out on many of these new platforms, many of which are owned by giant media conglomerates and film studios themselves, you kind of have no choice nowadays in the current climate to kind of double dip on these platforms specifically. Okay, just for disclaimer, before we start all this, we're not covering absolutely every single streaming service. If we do, we would be here forever.
We would literally be here for like years and years. Like,
yeah, exactly.
In the past few years, the number has gone from about 2 or 3 big main players to like just so many, because everyone's seen how big they are and how well they're doing, and everyone wants a piece of that pie.
I'm fairly sure that if you actually start sort of counting up like how much money you would have to pay each individual month on a subscription, it would probably be $100 plus each month. Easy.
It would be well into the hundreds.
Okay, but because of the amount of streaming services that we're going into, we're mostly going to be sticking to the ones that are the most accessible right now. So that would include stuff like Netflix and Amazon and so forth, because there are a few streaming services that we will cover, but they're only sort of released in specific worldwide markets, and it's a topic to be discussed because some of the decisions behind this are not cool in terms of like modern film distribution or anything like that, but we're gonna cover them anyway just for the sake of informative purposes and all that anyway. So if you're expecting us to go super in depth into the greatest streaming service all-time Quibi, get bent.
We're definitely not doing that. There's way too many out there, and there's some very, very, very niche ones. So we're going to be covering the sort of the main players. We've got about 6, maybe about 8 to sort of discuss. 6 in detail and another 2 sort of just in passing. But yeah, I think we're going to start with the main one, that being obviously Netflix. The very first one, the very first one to start doing their own original shows, as far as I'm aware. The very first one really that sort of kick-started this entire trend of doing the whole streaming service route.
I think it would be a bit difficult to sort of know for sure whether or not Netflix was one of the very first streaming services out there, but they have definitely become probably the most revolutionary in terms of what we've seen so far. Because obviously we know that they started out as a DVD rental service, and they started producing all of their original content, starting with House of Cards, starring everybody's favourite creep Kevin Spacey.
Oh god, that did not age well.
No, exactly. But Netflix has sort of evolved into its own unique beast, and it's changed both for the better and the worse and in a lot of ways, but I'll explain. Before all of the streaming platforms that we got nowadays, Netflix, even outside of like the originals that they sort of spawned, they were just a really awesome platform just to access such a wide range of films from a bunch of different studios and backgrounds and countries and all other sorts. But I think it's fair to say within like the last couple of years, with Warner Brothers starting up HBO Max, Disney starting up Disney Plus, Paramount owning CBS All Access, soon to be rebranded to Paramount Plus, and a bunch of others, a lot of the content that isn't specifically made for Netflix isn't on Netflix anymore, and that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, really, so many more studios wanted all the money that Netflix was getting, so they obviously pulled their own content from Netflix and put it onto their own site, which it's not great. It's kind of anti-consumer, but I don't know, I can sort of understand why they did it.
I think Netflix was able to sort of recover from it and overcompensate, because in terms of the original content that they do produce, we would be talking for well over an hour just detailing every single original film and every single original series that they spawned from it, because if there's one thing that Netflix did right, is that they provided their own content for their site to sort of compensate for all the studios going away. And we've got some amazing films, and we've also got some real stinkers out there as well.
That is the issue with Netflix. For every BoJack Horseman, you've got a Hoops or a Paradise PD. For every Irishman or Marriage Story, you've got The Package or something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hit or miss as to whether or not you're going to get something that's actually good or not. I think that's fair to say.
I don't see it as like an inherently bad thing, because since Netflix produce so much content anyway, you're always guaranteed to find a real good diamond in the rough anyway. Because I mean, I have a lot of thanks to give to Netflix, because BoJack Horseman was one of their very first original programs. That's my favorite show of all time, straight up.
Absolutely same.
Yeah, but they've also got stuff like The Umbrella Academy, which is a really fun superhero satire. I'm trying to think, what other original series do they have? We could be going on forever, but besides the point, they produce a lot of good content just from naturally having a lot to come out, and they've kind of become a big discussion point over the last few years, mainly because of how they've handled film distribution, but also kind of how it's changing the industry. I'd argue maybe for the better. Like, I don't know where to start with this. Have you ever seen the film Okja from Bong Joon-ho?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that was a film released in 2017 by Netflix, directed by Bong Joon-ho, which most people will know as the director behind the official
Parasite.
the official Oscar-winning Best Picture film Parasite, revolutionary. But that film got released to the Cannes Film Festival, and all I'll say is that a lot of people got really stingy towards Okja, because even though it was a feature film released by an esteemed, a beloved director, just the fact that it was a film released primarily for a streaming platform just ruffled a lot of feathers for a lot of people who were watching it at the film festival, as if it was meant to be compared to like just the standard theatrical film being released. And I don't quite know how to sort of react to that per se, because like, how can I describe it? We're living in a world where independent cinema is becoming more and more difficult to sort of get out there. Not necessarily because it's getting difficult to sort of financially invest in independent film, but more because the means of releasing it, especially theatrically, are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Like, for instance, Fox Searchlight, that was a studio that was once beloved under Fox, that was known for releasing and producing a lot of independent films, but obviously with it being now under Disney, it's becoming a bit more difficult for Searchlight to get the audience that it used to have. That I could go on forever with these. There's focus features under Universal, that's getting slowly difficult. But with Netflix, especially with the new age of streaming coming out, with other aspects of distribution, like especially with Prime Video as well, but we'll get to that later, independent cinema is becoming a lot more easier to distribute, because they don't necessarily have to worry about things being theatrical anymore. As long as it's being released primarily through streaming, there's going to be hopefully a guaranteed audience for them who's willing to watch it, instead of having to take a risk and double dip and watch something in a theatre. So there's good and bad points to all of it, I think.
And that's something I do love about Netflix, is that there really is something for everyone. So like you said, really, like these indie films that are coming out, they can release it knowing that there's going to be some kind of an audience for it, because if you have Netflix, then there's a lot of stuff there for you. I think whatever you're into, you are gonna be content with a Netflix subscription. You are going to find some things that you really like. You're going to find some shows, some films that you really like. Indie cinema, I think, really, this is kind of the way it's going, because Disney is kind of taking over the industry. They have a monopoly on the sort of cinema industry. I think places like Netflix and definitely Amazon Prime, which I will get to in a bit, and other places like that, is kind of where indie cinema kind of has to go at this point in time, because there's no other real place for it.
Like,
and that's really
and even then, I just kind of think it's a bit bullshit that people are sort of putting the blame on Netflix as if they're the death to cinema, which is completely wrong, because with almost all of the films that they do release, you know, before the pandemic at least, most of the films that they would put out, they would at least give a limited run in theatres, which, is mainly to abide to like the laws of the Academy, because if you want your films to be qualified for the Oscars and the Academy Awards generally, they need at least a limited run in theatres in order to qualify. Whether those rules will change now, maybe permanently, depending on how the pandemic goes on, we'll never know. But regardless, Netflix have been dedicated to keeping cinema preservation alive through their releases anyway. They aren't the death to cinema. If anything, they're helping it for the better right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are some genuinely really great films that have actually come out on Netflix.
Like even just on that subject, like they are not only producing great films, but a large amount of their films are true awards competitors now.
Oh yeah, no, that's literally what I was about to say. Like literally, like how many of the Best Picture nominees were from Netflix? Was like was it 3 last year?
I mean, just over like the last 2 years, I can think of specifically Roma from Alfonso Cuarón.
Yep.
Marriage Story from Noah Baumbach, which is amazing, and The Irishman from Martin Scorsese as well.
I'm pretty sure there was some more, but yeah, like literally the fact that Netflix has been releasing films that even the Academy kind of can't ignore at this point. They've got such huge directors like Martin Scorsese involved too, to make some real cinema.
Martin Scorsese has actively said many times throughout his career that it's harder and harder to get his films made because studios just don't like taking a gamble on an original project anymore.
Yeah.
And while it's kind of depressing that he's literally went and made a film for a streaming platform, I think it's creatively helped him for the better, because The Irishman had a lot of money and investment put into it just to get it brought to life, and I know a lot of it was because they had to sort of digitally de-age the actors to Tarkin Rogue One levels of mixed results, I'd argue. But what I mean is he was able to sort of creatively let himself flourish, and I'd argue for the better, and that goes the same with Noah Baumbach on Marriage Story and everything. And these films are becoming so prestiged that the Criterion Collection, which is a company that's been very well known for preserving a lot of modern contemporary genuine great cinema, they went out of their way to sort of preserve Marriage Story, Roma and The Irishman for physical release on the Criterion Collection, and I'm a sucker for them because I've invested at least 60 quid to get all 3 of those physically.
Jesus Christ, man. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't think you can really rule Netflix out, especially not now. Like, the amount of films that are coming out for it and the amount of art house films I can see coming out for it in the future. Like, I can see, like, Trial of the Chicago 7, which came out this year. I can see that getting at least a good few Oscar noms this coming year.
I think their animated films this year might get a chance as well, because The Willoughbys, one of their animated films came out this year, and I thought that was pretty good. Over the Moon, I thought was also very good, and I think a lot of that is attributed to the fact that Glenn Keane directed it, and it's built from like Disney musical roots and everything.
Yeah.
But they do know how to get a talent on board, and I think most of it is down to the fact that, unlike most other studios, Netflix just allow people the creative freedom. Like, Charlie Kaufman is a filmmaker that's so beloved, but he finds it's so difficult to see a lot of his films nowadays because he's just an experimental filmmaker. You don't see a film like Eternal Sunshine or Synecdoche, New York out there that much anymore. So kind of have to appreciate Netflix for letting him make a film, and that's how we got I'm Thinking of Ending Things as well.
Yeah. And that's another film I can definitely see getting nominated for at least a good like 2 or 3 Oscars this coming season.
So I bet you hundreds of people probably turn that film on not knowing what kind of filmmaker Charlie Kaufman's like, and just turning it off after like the 30-minute opening of just a couple talking in a car.
It's definitely an experience.
Yeah. Just to sort of wrap this up, though, if you don't have a Netflix subscription, I do not know what the hell's wrong with you, because they are providing some of the most top-quality content at the moment. At the moment, they're helping cinema when it's hanging by a thread at the moment. And yeah, they release a shit ton of stinkers, but do your research and hopefully you'll come across a BoJack and not a Kissing Booth. That's all I'll say.
And I mean, even if it's not for films, because I mean, I think arguably Netflix is so much better for TV shows than it is for films. There's so much out there.
You have no idea how many nominations they get specifically at the Emmys in comparison to literally every other network or streaming platform right now.
Yeah, I mean, literally, there's so much out there. Like, we mentioned stuff like BoJack, Orange is the New Black, House of Cards,
Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, I was about to say Umbrella Academy, but there's so much more out there, and to the point where no matter what sort of thing you're into, there's definitely going to be a good few shows for you to explore on Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have a subscription, just double dip in there and just dive in, because there's going to be guaranteed something for you there. And it's just good to support them because they care about cinema, they care about the preservation. They're clearly doing a lot to let passionate artists just do whatever the hell they want with it. And I think creatively standing, they're all the better for it. It does mean there's going to be a lot of shit on the platform, but if you look in the right places, you're just going to get a lot of gold at the same time.
As I say, really, although it's nowhere near as good as it used to be, because it used to be brilliant before companies started taking their stuff off of Netflix, it's still well worth the money to invest in.
Okay, I suppose on that bombshell, we'll now move on to Amazon Prime Video now, and
yeah, in the UK, it's probably, I'd say, either the main or the sort of second biggest competitor to Netflix over here, at least.
Yes, it's such a complicated service to talk about, because the thing I've sort of picked on with Amazon Prime Video is that depending on where you are internationally, you're probably going to get a different version of Prime Video than most other people.
Yeah.
Like, how can I describe it? Just to give people context, in the UK, we don't have Peacock or HBO Max or CBS All Access or any of that stuff. So that means that a lot of content that comes from those studios might likely at some point show up on Prime Video here, and that's awesome, because at least in the UK, if there's one thing I can give Prime Video a lot of praise, is that their library of content, particularly for outsourced television and films, it's awesome. There's no other way to put it. It's amazing. You get like the US Office, Futurama. I'm trying to actually, now that I think about it, those are the only 2 things I watch on there, but still.
Have they taken South Park off? Or
no, South Park's on there. They recently put season 23 on there, I think.
Nice. They have really been up in the content in the past couple of years, to the point where, like, even some of their originals are now quite heavily talked about. Like, I know a lot of people who watch Grand Tour and other sort of other shows from the Top Gear lot. And, I mean, we can't not talk about The Boys, which is just absolutely bloody fantastic.
It's made such a big scene this year, and for really good reason. Like, the Umbrella Academy, in my opinion, is inherently sillier, but I think it's something that they embrace. But the thing with The Boys is that it works both as a comedy, but also as a really great nail-biting satire and like modern comic book culture, because that show kind of like, I'll put it this way. If we lived in a world where sort of superheroes were ingrained into our society, the way that the reality is set up in The Boys is probably the most realistic approach they probably would have taken to integrating them into our society.
I can definitely see it happening more sort of like how The Boys portrays it. It's very capitalist, but it's very, very much how it would be.
Yeah, but it's not even just that. It works both as a comedy, but there are so many aspects to the show, especially with a lot of its supporting characters, that just it's really enriching. I don't quite know how to describe it. There's a lot of moments that are very funny, a lot of moments with a lot of great drama. There's some moments, like particularly in the first season with Homelander, that I think are especially dark, and it will not leave my mind anytime soon. But we'll be going on a tangent if we focus on this for too long. But if you haven't seen The Boys, at least a few episodes, do yourself a favor and give it a watch at some point, because it's some of the best television on right now.
If you take nothing else away from this podcast, just take away this. If you have Amazon Prime and you haven't watched The Boys, go and watch The Boys.
But even taking The Boys aside, a lot of the original content is definitely not to the same quantity as Netflix, but it still has, in my opinion, some worthy picks. Like, obviously, we looked at stuff like The Grand Tour, but one I do want to mention, because I don't think a lot of people talk about, is Undone.
Yes.
Because that show was created by Raphael Bob Waxberg, who people know as the creator of BoJack Horseman, which he co-created with Kate Purdy, who also wrote on BoJack Horseman. But the show is basically a really trippy existential crisis. That's the best way I can describe it. It follows a young woman named Alma who realizes that she has the powers to sort of travel back and manipulate time and everything, and it's animated beautifully with rotoscope animation where it's shot in live action, but then it's traced over to sort of give it this really trippy, surrealistic sort of look. And I have a lot of great things to say about it. Undone is fantastic in almost every single right. I expect nothing less in terms of the trippiness from Raphael Bob Waxberg. It was actually the reason why I initially got my subscription to it in the first place.
Yeah. One more thing that I do like is I think that Amazon Prime has a much lower sort of barrier of entry. The point where I think almost anyone can sort of put something on there. Like I'm working with a group of people right now doing the sound mixing for a film that they're doing.
Yeah.
And one of the films that they did previously, called Blackbird, is actually on Amazon Prime. And I'm pretty sure the one that I'm going to be working on will be too.
Like, I have one friend that I know who's released a short film through Prime, and even then, Prime's just kind of becoming this really great accessible hub where people can just sort of release their content regardless of what it is, and, you know, people can watch it however they please. And another thing that I don't think people talk about, especially when it comes to Prime Video, is that it's just a really good digital platform for just renting stuff if you just want to watch stuff.
Yeah.
Like, during this pandemic, when a lot of films were going to digital, like Trolls World Tour, Wonder Woman 1984, The Witches, and a bunch of stuff, I rented and watched all of those specifically through Prime, and it's just because it's very accessible, because it's on almost every smart TV under the sun, or any digital platform under the sun, and it's very quick and easy to use. I think the video player is really solid, regardless of what Scott the Woz says. I think it's very intuitive. It has a lot of really great background information on a lot of projects and everything. It's really great as like a digital streaming platform. I inherently disagree with buying stuff off digital platforms because you never technically own it. But if you're there just to rent stuff, Prime Video is awesome. Yeah,
absolutely. But one thing I've got to mention about Prime Video is that I don't think most people even know that they have it. Like, they'll get Amazon Prime because they want the delivery. And if you asked any Amazon Prime users if they knew about Amazon Prime Video, I think most of them would probably say, "What's Amazon Prime Video?" They wouldn't know that they have it.
No, I'm not kidding you. My family exploits the fact that I have a Prime subscription, even though I didn't get it for the delivery at all. I just wanted to watch Undone.
I think you're like one of the only people I know who got Amazon Prime purely for the video and not for.
I mean, I'm not bashing Amazon for that. The next day shipping is awesome, but still, my point
Having
still
said
stands.
that, though, I mean, to be fair, if it wasn't included in Amazon Prime, I don't think it would be really worth it, to be honest, because it's not as good as Netflix. It really does kind of feel like...
It comes down to quantity, and it also entirely depends on where you are internationally, because UK Amazon Prime Video is great, because we don't have a bunch of other scary streaming services to back our asses up. Like, because if like, for example, with CBS All Access, they have like a lot of Star Trek shows like Star Trek Picard and Lower Decks. Obviously, we don't have All Access, so what do? Amazon Prime picked it up, and you can just watch the new Star Trek shows there. Great. But if you live in the United States in particular, yeah, you'll get the awesome originals like The Boys and Hunters and Undone and Grand Tour and stuff. But if you're looking for anything outside of that, you're probably going to get a wasteland of shit.
And that's just the way with Amazon Prime Video. I think they sort of get what they can, but that obviously changes between region and region. There's only a few things that I'd really say are standout original contents. I think no matter what you like, it feels like a sort of diet Netflix in a way. You'd probably be a lot better off getting a Netflix account.
I'll put it this way. If you have like an international version of Prime, you're probably getting a very, very good bang for your buck. But if you live in the United States, I'd probably second guess it before you double. I think it just depends if you're willing to enjoy the original content, because yeah, The Boys is awesome, but is it worth an entire streaming platform for?
If you
probably
want
not.
The sort of next day delivery and you get quite a lot of stuff off Amazon anyway, I think it's probably worth it. But if you don't and you're just getting it for this, I'd maybe have second thoughts.
But it's still good. I recommend it. And on that bombshell, we're reaching the very first streaming platform that isn't, like, I'll put it this way. Amazon, Prime Video, and Netflix were companies that sort of started out doing their own thing, one being a DVD rental service and one being a package company. But now we're getting into the depths where a giant corporate overlord media conglomerate saw what Netflix are doing and
we can do what they're doing, and we can make a lot more money than we are off Netflix. So let's pull all of our stuff off of Netflix and do it ourselves. Disney Plus.
Therein lies Disney Plus. I don't think I'm in the right position to sort of criticize Disney or anything like that, because I will be the first to be upfront to say this. I signed up for Disney Plus day one.
You are part of the problem, I swear to God.
But okay, in all seriousness though, as a platform in itself, considering the amount of IP and franchises and films that are all owned by Disney that are pretty much all on your Disney Plus subscription at no extra cost or anything, just in terms of like the library of stuff they have, Disney Plus is inherently kind of brilliant. I'm not gonna shy away from that.
Yeah.
Like, if you want access to all of the Pixar movies, all of the Walt Disney Animation Studios films, pretty much the entire Star Wars library, that includes the movies and the TV shows like Clone Wars and Rebels and shit, or all the Marvel content, it's literally all there.
It's very good for fans of things. If you're a fan of Star Wars, if you're a fan of Marvel, if you're a fan of like just Disney films in general, pretty much everything you could ever want or ask for or need is right there.
Like, I found use for it because when lockdown was first imposed last year, I actually took all that time through the whole Disney Plus library to go through all like the Walt Disney Animation Studio films. So that ended up with me starting from like Snow White from 1937 and making my way all the way through up to Frozen 2 at that point. And it was awesome. I loved it. It was an awesome time just binging through a lot of these really great animated classics and everything. But I'll put it this way when it comes to Disney Plus. The big problem with Disney Plus is kind of the reason why it works so well in the first place. Like, yeah, there's a really great library and a ton of IP to work with, but if you're not inherently a massive Disney fanboy or a massive Marvel fanboy or a massive Star Wars fanboy, you're not exactly gonna get a big bang for your buck on it. It appeals to kind of a specific audience. That's what I mean.
I think right now, yes, that's absolutely correct. However, I think we can't not mention what's coming very soon.
I'll put it this way. I think in recent times, Disney looked at their library and thought, shit, we are appealing to quite a niche audience, mainly of like under 18s. And then they thought, wait a minute. We've recently bought Fox, and Fox has a lot of content for a wide range of demographics. Oh my god, what the hell are we doing? And
yes, we've got Star now, which is obviously going to have a lot more sort of, I think, 15 plus content on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know every single thing on the library, but I believe we're getting stuff like Grey's Anatomy, American Dad, Family Guy, Lost, and also, we'll get a bit more in depth for this when we get to Hulu, but even some originals from Hulu, like Love Victor and Solar Opposites, and a bunch of others are going to debut on their platform. And on a financial and business level, it's inherently great because that means that Disney will be able to appeal to a wider audience that isn't just there for Disney, because that's inherently a problem when you're a mass media corporation that's bought and ate up pretty much an entire media conglomerate on top of that, and it has a load of content that isn't automatically built for like a young crowd. There's stuff like Die Hard and Deadpool and Family Guy that is catered specifically to an adult audience. So that's kind of the problem with Disney, because Disney have molded themselves as like an all ages corporation with a lot of family friendly Disney-fied content, and there's nothing wrong with that, because Disney has such a massive hold on the media industry as it is, that there's already a massive subscriber base for Disney Plus. I'll put it this way, in the words of like Lordwell from Wonder Woman 1984,
stop it.
It was good,
Stop,
but it could be better.
Stop referencing that movie.
I'm not wrong though, am I?
I mean, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think Star is what Disney needed from the beginning. It needed that sort of extra little edge to sort of try and compete directly with something like Netflix, which has stuff for everyone. It needs something for everyone, and not just for like sort of like families and stuff, and U and PG and maybe 12 at a push rated content.
There's another problem with Disney Plus that I feel like it needs to be discussed, because while the overall library of content on Disney Plus is great, in terms of original content, I don't quite know what to say. I mean,
is it bad, really? I mean, we've got stuff like Mandalorian, we've got WandaVision, we've got Soul, which is bloody amazing.
Soul doesn't count though, because it was meant to be released in theaters. A pandemic happened and they had to dump it somewhere.
Technically speaking, it's an exclusive.
I mean, yeah, that's what I find so stingy. Like, I remember putting that movie on, and when it said Disney Plus original at the beginning, all I thought was, you sit on a throne of lies. But in all seriously though, like, The Mandalorian is fantastic. It's one of the best things to come out of Star Wars in a long time. WandaVision is not finished its entire run yet, but so far 5 episodes have aired and they're all really good and worth checking out. Star Wars The Clone Wars had its final season debut there, and that was also really good, but that also kind of lies the problem. Most of their content is specifically from Marvel and Star Wars in terms of original content, and they're both franchises with very massive and passionate fan bases for sure, but again, it's appealing to a niche crowd.
I mean, Disney Plus is very, very new. I think it definitely needs to, like,
it needs time in the oven to flourish and really have its library expand.
It needs to sort of step up a bit, and it needs to sort of get its own original content that isn't released as part of like a fan base. It needs its own very original projects, and I think they're going to do that, but it's a very new platform.
But they kind of do have that, because they release some films like Clouds and Godmothered and the one that's coming out soon called Flora and Ulysses and everything, and they are legitimate Disney movies and everything, but you kind of take a look at them and you realize they were films that Disney probably had in development, realized weren't going to be billion-dollar hits no matter the cost, and they thought, we might as well dump them on our platform.
I mean, yeah.
That's also inherently a problem with Disney, because if your movie isn't going to make $1 billion, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, then you know, they're not going to release it in theaters. They're just going to release a huge ton of IP. So if it isn't Marvel related or Star Wars related or a Disney animation film or a Pixar movie or a live action remake, you're not getting into theaters. It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it sucks. It really does. And now they are also releasing stuff that they're releasing in theaters side by side as Disney Plus releases.
Yeah, we need to discuss this a little bit, because as of this moment, we're a few weeks away from Walt Disney Animation Studios' new film, Raya and the Last Dragon, and they're doing a bit of an experiment with it. Earlier in the year, we got the remake of Mulan, and obviously it couldn't release in theaters because it was about to debut right as the pandemic got hit. And it was released later on in the year in September through Disney Plus, but with a massive ass catch.
That catch being 30 quid?
Yeah, they had this magical thing called Premier Access, and if you wanted to watch Mulan on your streaming platform, they effectively put it behind a paywall of about 20 quid in the UK, but a massive $30 in the United States. It isn't to own Mulan, it's to simply have access to Mulan on Disney Plus. And it was a bad decision, because they didn't release it on any other digital platforms like Prime or anything to rent, like any normal studio would do if they had a brain. They specifically gatekeeped it behind a subscription that you already had to pay for on top of a Premier Access paywall. And to put it bluntly, it was not a great idea. The film flopped as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Critics seem to like it okay, but if internet
did they really?
Did
they? I've seen nothing but absolutely just
check the RT score. Check the RT score.
God damn, I mean, I've heard so much flack given to this film. It's slated.
I'm not saying that I agree with them. I think the film's bloody awful as far as I'm concerned. But the release models was bad and the film flopped as a result, because if people wanted to watch Mulan, I think it would have been beneficial to just put it on a digital service like Prime and Rakuten and, you know, a bunch of other digital platforms. I think gatekeeping it on Disney Plus was a bad idea. But what I'm getting at is they're doing the same release model again with Raya and the Last Dragon, which is out in March. But I think the way they're handling it is inherently not bad. They're releasing it in theaters for theaters that are open if you want to watch it. But at the same time, on the same day, they're also releasing it on Disney Plus with the same Premier Access release scheme. So you still need your subscription and you also need to pay it on top of a giant paywall. But here's the thing. Considering that they're giving you the option to watch it in a theater if you want to and if theaters are open, it kind of makes the fact that the Premier Access function is also there not feel as bad, because I'll put it this way. If theaters are open when the movie comes out, but considering we're in lockdown again, I doubt that's gonna happen. If I had the option, I'd see Raya and the Last Dragon that way, just to also support the theaters, because that means Disney wouldn't get all the money. I don't inherently mind giving money to it, because it's very clear that Disney want to make money off the movie regardless, which is why they put on the paywall there. But it's better than they could have handled it. I think the simultaneous release model is working good, because Orion did it recently with like Bill and Ted Face the Music to solid success, and Warner Brothers is trying similar things, but we'll get to them later. But that's all. I'll stand there.
My thinking is, I'm fine with them doing that kind of thing, like, for now. But I also kind of think, if you're going to release it, don't stick it behind your streaming service, because it's going to ultimately do better if you don't.
Like, I think the simultaneous release model is good for a pandemic, but again, it's still gatekeeping it behind their platform. Just make it available to rent on a bunch of other digital platforms.
That's just the better way to do it. I don't know. It just feels like Disney are being Disney.
And I think that inherently sucks on a part of a lot of the storytellers and artists at Walt Disney Animation anyway, because people who work there have probably busted their arse to get these films made with intense passion for their craft. And yet it's been kind of gatekeeped and may very well not reach the audience it may have gotten if it had a full theatrical release without a pandemic in question.
But there lies my inherent issue with Disney, and why I haven't personally paid for a Disney Plus account, is you are at the mercy of Disney, who will pull a Disney, and you know they're going to pull a Disney, and it's a very Disney thing to do, and I'm not surprised they've done it. I'm just very disappointed.
We're still not sure if this experiment's going to work. We're just going to have to wait and see when the movie comes out, but I will not be shocked if this release model works, that we'll see films like Black Widow follow suit, and even like Pixar's next film Luca, and maybe even Eternals and stuff like that. It depends on like all of the other releases from Disney that are coming out this year, because I still want to see Luca because it's an original Pixar movie and I'm a sucker for them. And Black Widow will likely be very interesting, but I still stand by what I say. If Raya ends up being successful under the release model it's under, Black Widow, I guarantee you, will be released under that simultaneous release model.
I can somewhat see it being successful, because at least here in the UK, we can't go out. We can't see it in the theatre. If you want to watch Raya and the Last Dragon, you've got to pay the extra 20 quid and watch it on Disney Plus. You've got no choice.
We'll just have to wait and see on that, but I'll put it this way, just to wrap things up, because we're going to go into tangent at this rate. Disney Plus is a good streaming service, but it's not a great streaming service. It's got an impressive library, but it's kind of gatekeeped itself by having a bit too much of a niche audience to appeal to because of the unified Disney brand, which they are trying to fix and rectify, but that's only for like the international markets. That doesn't count for what they're doing in America, because Disney also have ownership over Hulu, which is basically where all of the non-Disney content but still owned by Disney content is just lying.
And speaking of niche audiences,
oh man,
Apple TV Plus. God.
I do not know anybody other than you who's actually paid for it.
I haven't paid for it. I've got a trial, and trust me that I'm going to cancel it anyway. So I've got two positive about Apple TV Plus, and one of them is just simply Wolf Walkers.
Okay. Okay, I'll get to that in a moment, but all I'll say for the matter is Apple TV is kind of at a crutch in the streaming wars for one reason, and that's because the only content that they personally own is the shit they make.
Yeah, because they've got a bunch of different channels which you ultimately have to pay extra for. Like, they've got Stars Play, which is like the blockbusters, stuff like that. They've got like a History Channel player. They've got like a kids player.
Like, Amazon Prime Video has done that before, and they've done it to success, because you can access stuff like Shudder and Stars Play as like an extension to your Amazon Prime subscription at a smaller cost. And I believe in America they've also included HBO Max as part of that Prime Video extension, so you can very well subscribe to Amazon Prime, but also only pay like a few extra dollars to access all the content on HBO Max just because you linked it to your Prime subscription. So you're getting a really great bang for your buck that way. And Amazon Prime have done that to great success. So why hasn't Apple done that, even though they're doing sort of a similar strategy anyway?
You've got to sign up for Apple TV Plus if you want their original content. And then if you want the rest of the stuff, you've kind of got to just sign up for more. And it's like, this is the kind of thing you would get as standard on Netflix. On Netflix or Amazon Prime or something, you'd get the originals plus some blockbusters plus whatever the hell else you want to watch. But no, on Apple TV, you've got to pay specifically for the thing you want, which I guess that means you're not getting bombarded with a bunch of stuff you don't want. But at the same time, it's like, if you want like the originals plus like some blockbusters, you've got to pay for 2 different subscriptions. And
they got into a bit of controversy this year because Apple, I believe over the last year, bought the rights to all of the streaming content for Peanuts, and they have a bunch of Charlie Brown shows and shit in development. Like, I know the Snoopy show is a thing that's coming out on it very soon, but
I think it's out already.
Yeah, but the problem with the thing is that also means they have access to all of these specials like The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, Merry Christmas Charlie Brown, and all of these specials that have become such classic household names for so many people, and they've become like holiday Christmas traditions for a lot of people because like channels like ABC would air like the Charlie Brown Christmas special every single year, and it's a tradition for a lot of people. And now it's gatekept because Apple now owns that content, and the only way you can get your Christmas fix with all of those Charlie Brown cartoons is by paying for Apple TV Plus, and that sucks.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just find the entire thing really kind of, a bit shady. Like, I'd say literally the only thing about Apple TV Plus that's anything kind of good about it is that if you're in the Apple ecosystem already, that's what it's designed for ultimately. It's designed for people who are in the Apple ecosystem. It's designed to be played on Apple TVs and nothing other than Apple TVs, because the UI is not good to navigate on a laptop or anything else. It's just made for Apple TV Plus and Apple TV.
If you're watching Apple TV Plus, or at least attempting to on like a Microsoft device or on a smart TV, get bent. That's the best way to put it. The best way you're accessing it is through an Apple device, and if you're a person like me who favours Windows just as a company tenfold, then you're kind of at a disadvantage.
Really, it's made for people who want to watch something with people they know in and they don't really care what it is. They've got new content sort of coming out quite regularly with quite big names. We've got obviously people like Bill Murray and Justin Timberlake on the sort of the main site, and Haley Steinfeld, M. Night Shyamalan. It's for people... It's made for people who want to watch things by people they know and don't really care what it is.
You kind of get the feeling, from the marketing at least, that they got a lot of names attached to it, and it looks very prestigious and important and everything, and there's nothing wrong with it, but at the same time they're just at a simple disadvantage because they don't own anything, so the only thing they have to work with is original content that they produce. And it's not that they're bad. I've heard good things about The Morning Show, I hear Central Park's good, I hear Ted Lasso's good, but do you want to know what the problem with that is? It's not the quality of the programming, it's the quantity of the programming.
Having only like originals on your streaming service when you don't really put out that much, like Disney can get away with it because they produce so much.
And Netflix have a ton just from a lot of independent companies anyway, even if they don't have all of that IP.
For something like Apple, like you're not known as a content creator.
You're a product company.
Yeah.
You're a company that sells electronic devices that sell hundreds because you'll have people waiting in line for the iPhone 69 at some point.
I mean, you're not wrong, to be fair. And the thing is, you can tell with Apple TV because they really run it like a products company. They run it as only the kind of thing you want to watch on and not a whole lot else. It's made as a product. Apple clearly don't really understand the streaming service model, and it really shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that the content's bad, because like I haven't watched a lot of Apple content, but I have seen 2 of them. There was On the Rocks, which was that new film from Sofia Coppola. It starred Rashida Jones and Bill Murray. I thought that film was really good. I didn't see it on Apple TV. I saw it when it was on a limited release in a cinema before the lockdowns happened again, so I went to a theatre to watch it. And that's the case for Wolf Walkers. I did see that, but I never watched it through Apple TV. I saw it at the BFI London Film Festival through a screener, so I was able to watch both of those, but that was because I watched them through alternate means. I didn't watch it through their service. And it's nothing against them. Like, Wolf Walkers is my favourite film of 2020. I think it's absolutely fantastic. One of the best animated movies since Spider-Verse, in my opinion. But that's kind of inherently the problem. I want to see a film like Wolf Walkers succeed, but it's gonna get a very limited audience because it's behind a subscription service that just isn't worth paying for right now.
Yeah, you're not wrong though. I mean, like Wolf Walkers, I'd say is the only thing that really made me go, yeah, okay, let's get a trial. So I'd advise people get an Apple TV trial, watch Wolf Walkers, watch like any other show you may be interested in, and then cancel because it's not fucking worth it.
It's not to say that the future's bad, though, for Apple TV, because they're becoming a bit more prominent, and I think over the next couple of years, they might be a massive competitor. Recently, we just had the Sundance Film Festival just happen, their very first digital one, and one of the biggest films there was a film called Coda, which is a film about a young girl who was born to deaf parents. She's the only hearing person within a deaf family and everything, but besides the point, the film was a hit at the festival, and Apple spent a record total of $30 million just to get the distribution license for that film and for a bunch of other films at that festival. And considering the amount of films they're starting to acquire and the fact that they're just producing a lot more content just to sort of fill up their library, I think within the next couple years Apple TV might become a very good platform for a lot of great content. Don't get me wrong, it's just that at the moment, right now, at this point in time as of recording, it's not worth getting. Will it be worth getting within the next couple of years? Maybe, who knows? Because I do know the Russo brothers, their new film Cherry, which is starring Tom Holland, that's coming out March, and I hate to admit it, but because it's a Russo brothers film and I like those guys, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to pay for a subscription to that thing now, aren't I? Or, you know, I might just get a free trial, watch Cherry, and then just cancel it after.
That's honestly the best way to go. And if you've already got a free trial, just make a new account, watch whatever you want to watch, and honestly, it's just not worth a subscription. There's not enough on it. If they can combine everything into sort of one big subscription, maybe, but I don't know.
The only reason I would say you need a subscription right now is if you're a diehard Snoopy stan, and that would be it.
Yeah, there's not much more I can say about this. It's a really niche thing made for people who really, really like Apple and just want to watch something and they don't really care what it is. It's just going to have a very, very high production value and a lot of people they know in.
If you want to know why the subscription service doesn't work, one of their shows, Mythic Quest, was a show I did not hear specifically from Apple or anything, but when the creator presented the show for the first time during a conference at Ubisoft at the last E3. So if it's E3 in particular that's advertising me that show and not specifically Apple, I think you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that Apple also aren't advertising it means I don't think they particularly care about Apple TV Plus, and if they don't even care, you shouldn't either. That's how I see it.
All I'll say for the record is I hope for the love of God Wolf Walkers gets a Blu-ray release at some point, because it needs an audience, and it's inevitably going to lose to soul in a lot of the animation categories, and it's likely not going to be watched by a lot of people because there's a lot of bullshit animation bias that's still going along with a lot of Academy members. I just hope that film gets more of an audience because it ain't getting it on Apple.
I'm at least glad it's nominated because I think that way it's going to get a lot more heads turned towards it, and I think it's going to get a bit more attention that it does deserve, because it's a pretty good film. It is good.
Okay, just to move away now from the Apple conundrum, this next service I doubt we'll talk about for nearly as long because it's only available in the United States, but it's still a massive contributor to all this, and it sort of links to Disney Plus, but we might as well talk about Hulu for a bit.
Yeah. I mean, how long do you think it's going to be until Hulu just becomes Disney Plus?
I mean, we're technically getting Hulu on top of our subscription to Disney Plus very soon anyway, so, I mean, we're getting it better off than the Americans because they're having to pay two separate subscriptions, maybe even more money on top of that because of... This is like a subscription regime that really sucks about Hulu. If you just buy the basic plan for like the lowest minimum, which I believe is like, I don't know, $6 or $7 a month, you get Hulu for sure, but it's with ads. It doesn't matter what show you watch, you're going to get interrupted by ads.
Stuff like Discovery Plus also has that, and it's just like, I don't know why you're doing this. If you're going to charge for it, why are we getting ads as well?
I'm not going to pretend like it's a bad thing or anything, because how can I describe it? There's also like a plan you can get with Hulu where you can get Hulu but also get a giant like TV plan which gives you access to a bunch of cable networks in the United States. So you're effectively getting a subscription service, but for a much bigger amount of money. You're effectively getting a cheaper alternative to cable. So,
I mean, yeah,
it's not bad.
When Star comes out on Disney Plus, I think that's really going to kill off Hulu because there's no real point to it when you have Star.
I mean, it's already inherently very annoying because a lot of the shows and a lot of the movies that pop up on it are stuff that I was very much interested in, but it was sort of locked out for the longest time. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this film because it stars Andy Samberg, but did you hear about the film Palm Springs?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a Hulu original film. It was big within the film community, and everybody was talking about it, but I couldn't watch it. And it's because it was back behind Hulu. It's finally getting a release this April on Prime, but
thank God.
Yeah, but the problem with Hulu is it's a problem with even the next the final one service that we're going to be talking about. But when you have a platform that's built only for one specific region, mainly the United States, that means a lot of content is either going to be not available at all, or it's just going to get outsourced to a different studio. Like, some companies have done it good, like the CW. I know with Riverdale, the only reason I mention Riverdale ever again is just for this example, screw that show. But the CW licensed that show to Netflix, so after its original airing in the United States, it's going to be on Netflix in the international territories the next day, so you don't really miss out on it for too long, and I think that's a great release model for that kind of show, if you ask me. CBS All Access have done that as well with all of their Star Trek content. Discovery's on Netflix, and the second a new episode drops on All Access, it's on Netflix the same day. Great, everybody gets to keep up with it, and that's the same with all of their content on All Access. But with Hulu, because Disney is such an inherently stingy company, we don't really get Hulu content internationally anymore. And here's the thing, there's also a big catch to this with Star, because the only content that's going on Star is the stuff that Disney specifically owns.
Yeah.
So stuff like Solar Opposites and Love Victor that are Hulu originals, they're owned by Hulu because they're released under Disney because they're Fox productions. But if you wanted something like Palm Springs or Run or the Animaniacs reboot, which are owned by different companies but just released through Hulu, we're still not going to get them because it's up to those other companies to decide what they're going to do with those shows for the international market. So yeah, with Star, we are technically getting Hulu, but it's like a decaf Hulu.
I'm just wondering really how much longer Hulu can really survive on the limited content it's going to be getting, because
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the subscriber base, Hulu does incredibly well in America, so they're not going anywhere.
If it's only served in America and Japan, it's just not going to get nearly the kind of reach that something like Disney Plus can get, because that's kind of restrictive.
I mean, I don't think the idea behind Hulu's inherently bad, because it's appealing to an audience that Disney ain't going to get on their own primary platform or anything. Because obviously with them buying out Fox, they have a shit ton of content, because people forget how much Fox make in terms of television. I mean, shows like The Simpsons in particular boomed because of how Fox handled it. And Disney just sees that as another major IP in their oven anyway, so and I suppose that's the same with Family Guy. I think that's the reason why Family Guy is still going on after all these years, not necessarily because it does well on cable, but because since it streams primarily on Hulu in America, it does extremely well on Hulu. So they're just going to keep making more and more Family Guy to have people continue to binge Family Guy.
I mean, I can imagine that just going straight to Disney Plus, though, really.
Hey, Lois, remember the time we got moved to Disney Plus? Disney just buy what they want and then kill it off. I mean, look what happened to Blue Sky.
Oh, God, Blue Sky, rip.
I feel so sorry for the guys at Blue Sky. I hope you guys get better jobs, preferably at a place that isn't owned by Disney. You guys deserve better.
Holy crap, Lois. They killed off Blue Sky?
Yeah, they just wanted the Ice Age IP. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about Hulu. We only bring this up because of how Disney's handling it, particularly for the international market. And I'm sure if you live in the United States, it's probably an awesome service, but we're getting a vanilla version of it very soon, which is not even the best version of it, and the future of it may be left to be desired. I don't know. Okay, on that bombshell, we are sad to say that we're on our last one.
Well, kind of. Before we do, I think we should just mention the couple more that we had in mind.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
Peacock and CBS All Access. Two more that I know nothing about.
I'll put it this way. Peacock is basically just the platform for The Office now, which is inherently counterintuitive because The Office got popular because of Netflix.
I mean, you say that, but they've got stuff like NBC, they've got the Universal stuff and DreamWorks and Illumination.
Yeah, but that already worked as a crutch towards Netflix, because like DreamWorks, in terms of their television content, they were all over Netflix. Yeah. Like, we got like Troll Hunters, which was an awesome show, She-Ra, which was also awesome, and a bunch of other TV content like Voltron and shit like that. And all of their content's going to go to Peacock now because most of their Netflix content, in terms of like She-Ra and Troll Hunters, is done. So,
luckily, we still have all that kind of stuff over here.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's bad or anything, and I still recommend you check those shows out if you're into them, but that's kind of a crunch because Peacock is basically just snatching more content because of their IP, and I hate to say it, but I don't think Universal, they're not like Disney to me. They have an amazing library of content, but it doesn't have a brand that makes them appealing per se. If you want to watch, I don't know, The Boss Baby, you got it.
If you want to watch Shrek all day, every day, Peacock is your go-to.
Like, there's not even a lot to say about it, because even from researching it, there's nothing to say. It's the most vanilla thing you could look at.
They've got quite a lot of nice things here, I guess, like having stuff like WWE. That's going to sort of bring in some niche.
You'll see a lot of people just subscribing to it miserably because that's the only place they can watch The Office now.
That's
but the UK Netflix boys have The Office. Na 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 na.
And you can access it with today's sponsor, VPN. No, we're not sponsored.
Please sponsor us. We want to get monetized for this shit.
Imagine sponsoring a dead podcast. So yeah, and the last one is the soon-to-be renamed CBS All Access.
The only reason we're going to bring this up is because in March they're going to rebrand it into Paramount Plus. Gee, I wonder why they decided to do that. Looks at Disney. Okay, in all seriousness though, it's not like Peacock where I don't think Paramount has a massive amount of content, because they do. I mean, think about it. They have MTV, they have Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, Star Trek. They have a massive library with very dedicated fan bases. So, how can I describe it? CBS All Access only really flopped because it only appealed to one real audience, and that's the Trekkies. If you weren't into Star Trek, why did you need All Access? They had like that reboot of the Twilight Zone, which I heard was good. And they have like a bunch of CSI stuff, but again, it's just CSI and Star Trek. If you're not into that, then what's the deal? But I think with them rebranding it, and I think it's also the fact that they're opening up a ton more content, so we're going to see all the stuff from Nickelodeon and Comedy Central and all that. But even then, not all of it, because as far as I'm aware, in America, South Park, a Comedy Central Viacom-owned show, has the streaming rights to South Park through HBO Max, so they're not even going to get all of that. So I don't know what really gives. Just on that sort of bombshell, I think it's great that they're being rebranded. If you haven't seen some of the commercials they've done, I think they're legitimately awesome. Because they had like many of their IPs like climb up Paramount Mountain and just interact with each other. So you saw like Dora the Explorer, Butthead, Spock. I'm not shitting you about any of these.
Yeah, okay, I'll go and check those out because that sounds like an absolute trip.
And I also know that it's also going to be the house to that Camp Coral SpongeBob show, which I'll put it this way: don't talk to any animation fan about Camp Coral because they'll probably want to slit your throat just for it existing.
Oh boy, okay.
CBS All Access, the perfect home for anybody who likes Star Trek and literally nothing else. Glad it's being rebranded.
Right, and the last one I think we've really got to talk about, and got to talk about in quite good detail because of what's happening with it, HBO Max.
Okay, before we get to that, I think HBO Max is an unironically awesome streaming platform.
I mean, looking at what they've got here, like having stuff like DC Universe, having Studio Ghibli, Cartoon Network, New Line Cinema, this looks like they've got quite a good selection of things.
And also through like a deal I believe Disney Plus has through Fox, they have a bunch of the Searchlight content, so you can watch stuff like Jojo Rabbit on there if you want to, and that's great. They work because Warner Brothers just has a really appealing library, and just on a bit of a tangent, I'm glad that they've kind of defunct DC Universe, because as of this moment, DC Universe is being reworked into like a comic book streaming service now. They initially started to like stream a bunch of their own original content like Harley Quinn and Titans and Doom Patrol and everything, but here's the inherent problem about it. It's like CBS All Access with Star Trek. You might as well call it Star Trek Universe. But just on a tangent, the fact that their content is now moved to HBO Max permanently, and they reworked DC Universe to be specifically just for the comic-related stuff.
Yeah.
That was probably the smartest decision they could have made with those shows.
If you're in America, I think it's probably one of the biggest players out there, especially with what's going to come later. I think it could well be a good replacement for Netflix if you're looking to switch.
It's definitely not perfect, though, because for one thing, people don't mention this, but HBO Max is so expensive. $13 to $14 a month just to have HBO Max, and that's the average price for Netflix, but Netflix has so much content, I think they're willing to compensate for it. HBO Max works in a similar way to Disney Plus in the sense that it's Warner Brothers IP. So, is it worth $14 a month? In my opinion, no.
I don't know if it is, but I can see them putting their finger out, making a few more originals, and maybe then it can level the playing field a bit with Netflix.
I think we talked about it enough. Let's rip off the Band-Aid.
Oh boy, so for those who don't know, Warner Brothers have basically said that all the films that they release in the coming year, they're going to release simultaneously in cinemas and on HBO Max.
If you do not know how bad that is, that would mean hundreds upon hundreds of films released that year are going to be released under this new release model, and it's including but not limited to Space Jam: A New Legacy, Tom and Jerry, Wonder Woman 1984, The Little Things, Judas and the Black Messiah, The Matrix, Suicide Squad, Dune, and so much bloody more. And I don't think it's inherently an awful thing for Warner Brothers to want to explore options to release their films given the state of the world right now in a pandemic. That makes sense. What does not make sense is the fact that they're not only putting all of these films on their platform at no extra cost, because at least Disney had a brain to say they wanted to charge them for their films. That's one thing I'll give Disney about this. They at least had the idea to charge people specifically for the film they wanted to put on the platform. At least they were trying to benefit from monetizing on it.
Shouldn't have been put on the platform, but yeah.
It's effectively a middle finger to movie theaters for one thing, because they're having to compete against people having to pay about $7 to $8 to see it in a theater, where they can watch it for basically free with their subscription at home if they wanted to. And not only is that bad in terms of the box office potential that these films could have desperately needed by releasing it in theaters, but it's also just kind of inherent like a really bad laziness in audiences going forward, because if you wanted to watch Tom and Jerry or Godzilla vs. Kong or Space Jam or The Matrix, they're just going to watch it at home, aren't they?
Yeah. I think releasing it on this streaming service right now is not a bad thing at all, but claiming that no matter what happens with this pandemic, where we're going to be at the end of this coming year, yeah, this is just a really bad decision.
I think it would be incredibly unrealistic and incredibly ballsy of Warner Bros. To assume that this whole year is going to be a write-off, because we don't know what's going to happen. And also, it's going to be bad for a lot of releases internationally, because I don't think people knew about this, but when Wonder Woman 1984 came out, it had a international run with cinemas, which I don't think is an inherently bad idea per se, but the problem was, in the UK, Wonder Woman 1984 debuted right in the middle of December, just before Christmas, and around this time, more than half of the country was locked down and theatres weren't legally allowed to open under Tier 3 restrictions, and like hundreds of people, I was unfortunately within those boundaries, so I had no way of watching Wonder Woman 1984 for a whole month, until about mid-January when they put it on PVOD, and I watched it that way, and I spent £16 on what was one of the shittiest movies I saw that entire year.
Yeah.
So I'd argue that was money well spent.
Absolutely. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that, to be honest.
Like, okay, I'll put it this way. What does that mean for films like in the UK for Space Jam or Tom and Jerry or Godzilla or The Matrix or Dune? Are we just going to have to suck it up until they eventually, after like a month or so, put it on PVOD at a premium price? Screw that. Screw that.
That's probably what's going to happen, but my thought is, how long can they really do this for? Because they're going to lose a ton of money this year by doing that. So
we aren't talking about small films. A lot of these films are 100+ million budgeted films with likely even bigger market campaigns literally on the horizon when they get closer to release. So it's not going to be financially viable, at least with Disney. Yeah, they're doing the simultaneous release behind their subscription service, but they're asking people to pay for them specifically to watch that movie specifically. They're only testing the waters. They're not just writing off the entire year. Films like Black Widow or Luca and a bunch of others may very well still be released in theaters this year. They aren't acting like the year's going to be the be-all end-all. They're testing the waters, and I think for the circumstances right now, that's kind of the right way to go. Warner Brothers are being incredibly ballsy about this simultaneous release strategy. It will get people excited when they'll release a montagey trailer with like brief clips of Godzilla bashing Kong's brains in.
As I say, really, ultimately, they're going to lose a ton of money from this, and I don't think that is going to continue.
Yeah, I'm bitter about it. really. I don't think a simultaneous release strategy is bad at all, but they could have handled it so much better way. Like, I'll put it this way, even when they announced that Wonder Woman 1984 was going to be a simultaneous release, if it was just a one-off because that film was sitting on the shelf for over a year, like, that film's been delayed, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, I think. Like, that film was completed a whole year before it was even released, as far as I'm aware, according to Patty Jenkins.
And was it worth it? No.
I mean, if you watched it on HBO Max, at least you didn't waste money.
I mean, I guess, but even so.
Yeah. Well, I did. I spent 16 bloody smackers on it. And that was just for a rental.
I don't know why you did, to be honest, but okay.
I need to get caught up with it, because if you don't watch your comic book movies almost on the day-to-day dates, you're going to miss out on, like, the this is good but it can be better movies and all that.
And the fact that I need to touch as many people at the same time.
Oh man, Pedro Pascal. That man literally ended, like, December with the final Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, which was such an amazing finale to such a great show, probably one of the best of the year, and then he followed it up literally 1 week later on Christmas Day with that.
Anyway, I think we're getting a bit sidetracked now.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think that just writing off this year and saying, yeah, lol, the pandemic's gonna be a full year thing, I think is a little bit, I don't know, I'm not a fan of it.
It's a complicated situation right now, and I think the only reason we're talking about it now to this big of an extent is because we're in this sort of weird period of limbo within, like, what the industry's going through, where things may potentially change drastically over the next few years, and that just depends entirely on what the pandemic's going to meet for us. I have a bit of a prediction that we may very well be back in theatres again sometime within the second half of the year, because vaccines are getting rolled out, and cases will probably go down at some point as a result of mass vaccinating and everything. I have a belief that we'll be back in theatres by the end of the year at the very most.
I hope so. God, I hope so.
Yeah, I desperately hope so, because I miss cinemas, but don't take this as us taking a dump on streaming services, because I'm a sucker for them, just as a film fan and as somebody who likes to keep up with releases and reviewing stuff. And considering that most of them are at low prices on monthly subscriptions, they're not exactly a hole in your wallet to acquire them. Unless, you know, you subscribe to all of them like an idiot like I do.
I don't know why you do.
But in short, take what we talked about within the last hour as, I'd argue, as a recommendation as to how you should spend your money on these, because Lord help me, we know people are at home with little to do and they just want to watch stuff and, you know, just take our word for it and just take a dip into these things, you know? Like, streaming services are permanently going to be here to stay, because it's just naturally better for the film market and just especially good for independent filmmakers if, you know, stuff like the purchases from Sundance with Apple or anything to go by.
Yeah, and I've got to ask though, what do you think the current state of streaming service is? Where do you think it's going? Because I can honestly see it becoming like kind of like the next TV. Like, you're going to buy a box that kind of has like one big subscription to everything. I can see that happening in the future at some point.
I think they're going to be here to stay, and I think it's just going to rise. I mean, like, if you want context, Netflix has well over 200 million subscribers right now, and considering the amount of territories they own and the population, just generally speaking, that's a lot just for a streaming service. I don't think people quite realise that. I think they're important to keep, because even though I think preservation for cinemas is incredibly important and they need to stick around, studios and filmmakers need alternatives to get their content out there. There's no doubt about that. They need to stay. It's just generally healthy for the well-being, because if they don't stick around, the only average normie is just going to talk about whatever the latest Marvel movie is and not delve into anything else, and that's just, in my opinion, an inherently unhealthy way to just sort of look at the film community and film discussion and everything related to that. I'm happy that Netflix is around, I'm happy that Prime's around, Disney Plus and all of that. I don't know, we'll see what they do with it over the coming years, but they're here to stay, and I don't mind them being around. I think they're important to keep around.
Yeah, but as I say, really, like, do we really need as many as we're getting? Because let's be real here. Like,
definitely not. Definitely not.
For certain ones especially, there's only one or two real standout shows, and it's like, that's kind of why I can see it going the route of TV, where you basically pay one sort of quite big subscription a month and have, like, maybe a box installed which has all the streaming services on.
There's already some scummy tactics like that. I mean, look at BritBox.
Oh, God, yeah.
No, you get like the BBC, who already ask for a giant subscription-esque fee just to access a TV license and general cable, and then they pretend that they have a brand new subscription service on top of that with a shit ton of content from their BBC backlog that they're just not putting on iPlayer. Yeah. So if you want to have your binge set of Spitting Image and classic Doctor Who, you're buggered unless you subscribe to that. And that kind of gatekeeping is...
Yeah, putting Doctor Who and, you know, all the other sort of classic box sets on BritBox is just really, really sketchy, especially when you've got... Especially when you already pay for a TV license to access BBC content, and they could easily put it on for free through the iPlayer, which is legally plausible if you have a bloody TV license in the first place. Because legally you can't use iPlayer if you haven't got a license in the UK. And as for Spitting Image, if you put a VPN on, you can watch it on YouTube, but you did not hear that from me.
Don't support BritBox. Okay, on that bombshell, I think we're done here.
Yeah, I think it is time to end. So, streaming services as a whole, there's way too many out there, and there's certain ones which you only really are going to subscribe to for a very, very certain amount of shows, which is really kind of sketchy and anti-consumer, but it is ultimately here to stay. I'd say support like the ones that have multiple bits of content that you really want to watch. I'd say definitely support like Netflix, probably Disney Plus if you're not like me and you actually like Disney.
And if you just want general TV content, Prime's not a bad option either.
Yeah, I'd say get Prime if you really want the delivery. I think see Prime Video as a bonus, I'd say. Don't be like Kyle and don't buy it specifically to watch a few shows.
Apple TV is worth getting probably in the next few years, definitely not now.
Yeah, and I think that basically wraps up pretty much everything we've got to say on the matter.
I'm also just glad to say we're back in general. We'll be back with our next episode in March, where we're going to cover an entire spoiler discussion on the entire series of WandaVision when all the episodes have dropped and we've seen them all. And we'll be back for spoiler free very soon as well. We've got a few bits of news and reviews on the cards, pre-streaming releases that we can cover as well for you guys.
Yes. Okay, so with that being said, I've been Ned.
I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.